Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. We are learning Maseches Moed Kattan, Daf Yomi. Today's Gemara is partially halachic, and then we're going to move into Agadatas for the full length of the page today. And we'll be stopping just at the very last couple of words on the page, but right before the Tanu Rabbanan. We're starting at a fresh Mishnah, and the Mishnah reads, Ein koren velo cholzin ve'ein mavrin. We do not do kriya. We do not do chalitza, which in this case, the cholzin is removing the clothing from one's shoulders. Ve'ein mavrin, we also don't have that special meal, ella, except for krovav shalmeis, only for immediate relatives. Namely, if you're a not immediate relative, you do not do these kinds of things. Ve'ein mavrin ella al mita zekufa, and we do not have the sudas havra on a regular bed. It can't be the turned over bed. It has to be a regular bed. And the Gemara says, who was the Mishnah trying to exclude? Right, the Mishnah had said that it's only for family. Who were you trying to exclude? Says the Gemara at the top of Chafei Amud Aleph, Afilu Chacham. Would you say that it's also true about a Chacham that we don't tear Kriya on him? We know that's not true. Says the Gemara, V'hatanya, the Brisa writes that we absolutely tear Kriya on a Chacham. Chacham Shemeisa Kol Krovav. Everyone is treated as a Karov to the Chacham who dies. Says the Gemara, Hakol Krovav Salka Daitach. Can you really say that everyone is considered like a relative? That's not true. Ella, how do we understand this line of Hakol Krovav by a Chacham? Ella, Hakol kikrovav, in that Hakol koren alav, everyone tears kriya on a chacham. Hakol cholzin alav, we remove the shirt from our shoulder. Hakol mavrin alav birchava. So it can't be that our Mishnah is trying to exclude the case of a chacham. Therefore, what must it be? Lo tzricha, it must be the case of the lav chacham. That we're talking about someone who isn't a chacham, he's a regular Jew. Says the Gemara, well, if that's the case, and you're trying to exclude a regular Jew from doing kriya, that's not correct. Vi adam kasher, who, if the person was an adam kasher, the Gemara says, chiyuv mechayev lenikra. We have to tear kriya for a regular person who dies as long as he's an adam kasher. Okay, how do we know that this is true? Tanya. The Brisa writes 6-7 lines down. What would be the case where a person would have an onesh of children passing away young? It's kedei sheyivke v'yisabel al adam kasher, so that seemingly in the future he'll respond by davening on adam kasher. Says the Gemara, the tense doesn't make sense. Such a sharp. It's not like you did anything wrong in the past, right? It's not an onesh. It's just saying that you should be. So Rahman al-Latsan, a person can lose a young child because they should have done. It's very strange. It says the Gemara, Yivke v'yisabel in the future tense. Arvona kashakil minei, and because of that, you took a child, you took his guarantor. Why would you do that? Ella, that doesn't make sense. That's not what the Gemara means. Ella. That a person can get mechila on all of their avonos if they were only to daven for someone who wasn't adam kasher, and that also would mean in this case that if we were going to make sure that we take care of him by doing kriya, so he's also not excluded in our Mishnah. Therefore, we need to come up with yet another answer. So who is being excluded in our Mishnah from kriya and from chalitza and from the sudas havra? Says the Gemara, there should be a lo tzricha here, the lab adam kasher. We're talking about a person who's not an adam kasher. He's not a good person. He's Jewish. He's a Yid. He's just not a good person. So says the Gemara, well, okay, maybe, but but had it been that the person was present, that let's say if a doctor is present at the Yetzias Neshama of a person who's a Rasha, so then the halacha is chiyuv mechayev. You still have to tear kriya under those circumstances. The Tanya, Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer ala meis b'shas Yetzias Neshama chayev likra, that no matter what, if a person is standing over a mace, whether or not they're an adam kasher or not an adam kasher, we have to tear kriya. So says the Gemara, what is that similar to? Let's say for Torah Shenisrav Shechayev Likra, we would compare the death of a human being, even though this human being is not perfect. We compare it to a Sefer Torah, which doesn't. What? Any person perfect? No, of course. I don't mean perfection in a perfect way. You're right. I just mean that a person who's really not even trying, and they're like whatever an Adam Rasha is. I don't know. There are halachic definitions, there are social definitions, there are personal definitions. I don't know what the definition is, but the answer is that a person is not an Adam Kasher. So even a person who's not an Adam Kasher is equivalent to a Sefer Torah, where everyone is chayav likra. So again, we're back to our question. We don't know what our Mishnah is trying to exclude. So 1/3 of the way down, 2 lines before the wide lines, the Gemara says, "You're right. It must be that we are talking about an Adam Shelo Kasher and." And under those circumstances, that's what our Mishnah is trying to exclude. From here to the top of the next page, we're going to learn agadatas about things that happened when some of the greats of our history passed away. Says the Gemara, last short line. When he died, lo karu rabbanan alei. There were people in town who didn't tear kriya over him. Amre, their logic was lo gamrinan mine. We weren't in his shiur. He wasn't our rebbe, so therefore we didn't tear kriya. Amar luhu abaye mi tanya harav shemes. It's a real, just a smack in the face, guys. It says chacham. It doesn't have to be a rebbe to tear kriya. If he's a chacham, you should tear kriya. So it says the Gemara, chacham shemes tanya. A regular person should tear kriya over every chacham. The Moed, not only that, but kol yoma, every day shmai to say bepumin bevei medrasha. His Torah is being quoted all the time in the base medrasha. Safra was one of the greats of the Amoraim. People talk about his Torah all the time. We have him throughout Shas. So therefore, you should have torn kriya. So savar maida hava. They thought, well, window of opportunity is lost. We know you only tear b'shas chimum, so maybe we shouldn't tear at all. So then Amar le'abai tanina, we learned chacham kol zman she'oskim behesped chayav on likroa. So no, guys, you guys are off your game. First, you didn't do it in the first place. Then you thought you weren't supposed to do it. No, you were supposed to do it. So then, okay, I didn't realize that because I just thought we lost the opportunity. Several of the then they put their hands on their shirts to tear their shirts down for the Rebbe. And Amar lu Abaye, no, not now. Amar lu Abaye, Tanya chacham kavoda behespedo. It has to be at the time of the hesped. So the next time there's a hesped that's going on, that's when you should be tearing on Rav Safra. So I don't know, normally the way that this is spoken about in poskim is that when there is a Rebbe Muvhak, the Rebbe who teaches you most of the Torah that you know, he is your Rebbe Muvhak, you have to tear Kriya anywhere in the world, with him, not with him, doesn't matter. When every Chacham dies, not everybody tears Kriya. There were people in town, I remember hearing stories when Rav Gedaliah Schwartz Zatzal died, that people did tear Kriya. People who are very close to him. I guess there might have been Rebbe Muvhak, but the way the Gemara is framing right now is that whenever any Chacham dies that we tear Kriya, I don't believe that that's the common behavior. The Gemara says 5 lines into the wide lines, another story. Kinach nafshe de Rav Huna, and from here till the end of the page, we're going to be learning all about Rav Huna, some very remarkable stories. When Rav Huna died, Savur lo osuve sefer Torah apuryes. They wanted to put a sefer Torah on his bed. Okay. So it says the Gemara, Amar Lahu Rav Chizah Milsa de Bechaylo Svirle. What? Where he used to sleep? Where he currently is as a mace. So he's in his bed in his house, not alive, and they wanted to put a Sefer Torah on his bed. So the Gemara says, if he wasn't willing to do it while he's alive, hashta leikum le'abed. Now that he's dead, we will do it. What happened during his life that he would not lie in the same bed as a Sefer Torah? The Gemara says halfway down, I saw that Rav Huna wanted to sit down on his bed. There was a Sefer Torah sitting there. The kaf kada a'ara. He flipped over a container on the ground. Sefer Torah, and that's where he put the Sefer Torah. So that obviously he cannot be in the same bed as the Sefer Torah. Alma, what do we see from here? You're not allowed to sit in a bed where there's a Sefer Torah. You're saying, what's the Havamina that he would put a Sefer Torah? Because he was such I imagine because he was so amazing. So if you look at Rashi kind of answers your question on line 5. Rashi says, that this one kept that one. But Rav Huna kept all the halachos in Torah mamash perfect, like perfection. This one is perfection. It's amazing. It's unbelievable. So he kept the Torah so beautifully, so then they should put him on the same bed. But then they're like, Rav Huna didn't let it when he was alive, so he's certainly not going to let it when he was dead. It was a show of kavod. Then the Gemara says in the next section, halfway down, 9 lines into the wide lines, the Gemara says, they'll have a nothing purya mibava. They had a problem. Rav Huna died. His bed was a king-size bed, and it didn't fit out the door. Okay. So says the Gemara, what should they do? So they were going to get some type of crane, and they were just going to raise him on his bed from the roof. Raise the roof. You're not allowed to do that. The right way to move a chacham is through his doorway. They're like, fine, let's get him off of this king-size bed and put him on a twin bed. Put him on a single bed. Let's get him out of the room. Says the Gemara, you can't do that either. It has to be only in the initial bed that he died. How do we know that a Talmud Chacham should only be moved in his initial bed? Talking about moving the Aron. Didn't fit through the door. So paras bava ve'afkuha, they broke down the wall, and that's how they took it out. So that's what you should do. If the person dies in the room, instead of moving him and you're going to moving him on his bed, you got to break the door frame. You'll rebuild it afterwards. Next, as it relates to Rav Huna, when he died, it was appropriate for the Shechina to dwell on Rav Huna. He was so amazing. The fact that he lived in Bavel, it caused for the Shekhinah to not dwell on him. Masi Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda, the child of Rav Chizda, said, hold on one second. One of the two kids of Rav Chizda said, which is a reference to somewhere in Bavel, in the Babylonian landscape, somewhere over there. So we see that there was Yechezkel ben Buzi, there was Dvar Hashem outside of Eretz Yisrael. So we see that there is Shekhinah outside of Eretz Yisrael. Why is it that Rav Huna wasn't Zocheh? Because he lived in Bavel, big deal. The pasuk says it was in Kattan, so then it should have worked. So Tafachle Abuha Besandale. Wow, this is good parenting. 101. Take your shoe off and smack your kid across the head with it. So his father hit him with a sandal. Amar le, lav aminalach lo sitro d'alma. Didn't I tell you to stop bothering people? Well, what are you even talking about? You don't even make any sense. My haya. What does it mean haya? Shahaya kfar. He already had the nevuah while he was in Eretz Yisrael. He only repeated it now that he was in Kasdim, but he got the nevuah only in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, we see that Rav Huna couldn't have Shekhinah in Bavel because it only exists in that form in Eretz Yisrael. Fine. When they took Rav Huna to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Huna Asi. They said Rav Ami and Rav Asi, the great Amoraim of Eretz Yisrael, that Rav Huna was coming to town. They said they didn't know he was dead. They said when we were there, lo hava lo and lidluye resh mine. We didn't even take our eyes off of him. We wanted to see every last nuance that he did. Hashta asinan hacha asa betrayin. So now he's coming after us over here in town. Like this is a total flip of kavod. What's happening here? Amrle, no, Aronoba. He's not alive anymore. He's dead. His Aron is coming to town. So then the Gemara says, Rav Ami and Rav Asi nafuk. The two of them did go out to give kavod to the Aron. Rav Ela Rav Chanina. Lo nafak, and these two did not go out. And then the Gemara has first very long line. Ika da Amre, Rabbi Ela nafak, Rabbi Chanina lo nafak. Some say that one of the latter two did go out and the other did not. Now, why did some go out and some not go out to go see the Aron? The nafak my time, the ones who went out, why did they go out? The Tanya, because the Brisa writes, Aron however b'shura. If there's an Aron moving from one place to another, it's appropriate to stand up b'shura. And as well, you saw the appropriate brachos and you give nichum avelim. And what about those who didn't go out to see the procession of Rav Huna? To lo nafak my time, how could they not go out to see the Aron of Rav Huna, the great? So it says Gemara, the Tanya, Aron over mi makom makom einom omden lo b'shura ve'einom mermel birchas avelim v'tan chumei avelim. So two brises, one that are soser one another. And the Gemara says kasha nahadade. These two brises seem to be soser one another. Which one is it? Is it appropriate? Is it not appropriate? They're all in the same base medrash. So like they're all like the wires were crossed. What happened? Says the Gemara, lo saimuha kamei. What does lo saimuha kamei mean? So let's take a look at Rashi. I didn't mark off where the Rashi is, but I know that I read it. Here it is. Lo saimuha kamei, 2/3, 3/4 of the way down. To shaldu hava kayemes. That I skipped a line. Yeah. Lokashia. The Gemara says there's one brisa that says that we do go out for the mace, and one says we don't. Lokashia kansha shaldu kayemes. One is where the spine of the mace is still intact, and kan b'shein shaldu kayemes, where the spine is not intact. Rav Huna shaldu kayemes hava, and his spine was intact. Udulo nafak. Those who went out lo saimuha kamei. They didn't know whether or not his spine was intact. They assumed that it wasn't. Okay. Where are we going to bury him? So they responded, Rav Huna rebates Torah b'Yisrael. Rav Huna was the one who taught a lot of Torah in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Chia rebates Torah b'Yisrael hava, and he taught Torah in Eretz Yisrael. So let's put them together.
What was it about the spine being intact?
When the person's spine is intact, then everyone's obligated to go out and follow the procession, stand in a shura when Rav Huna would come by in his casket, because his skeleton was intact, his spine was intact. So then people would have to go out. And if there was a person who was Rahman al-Islam cremated, let's say, some of them up where the body is just unrecognizable, so then there's no obligation to go out and to stand in procession. So then they said, who's going to be the one to bring him he was like buried in a catacomb. We've discussed this before, but he was buried in some kind of catacomb. We're 10 lines from the bottom, Kafei Amid Aleph. So man ma'ayale. So Amar le Rav Chaga, ana ma'ayal nale. Rav Chaga, who was the Talmud of Rav Huna, said, I will bury him. I learned all of his Torah when I was only a young man of 18 years old. And I never saw any keri, no shechva zera, nothing outside of halacha contexts for his whole life, it seems. And then the Gemara says, I also served him. And I also know all of his actions very well. The Yom Echad, talk about from, check this out. The Gemara says 8 lines from the bottom. One day, there was one day that Rav Huna was putting on his tefillin, and it rotated. One of the straps rotated, and he was on the white side was facing up, and the black side was facing down. The Yasiv Allah arba'in ta'anesa. He fasted 40 times. He fasted 40 times for tainus. It's unbelievable. Just because his ritzuos, that's not even. We're like, okay, no, turn the ritzuos over. He was a big deal by him. The tzaddikim are judged kechut hase'ara. They're judged on a much, much higher level. For us, we put on our tefillin and sat through shachars, we're doing good. Like we have a very culturally, our standards have dropped, but we should be davening like the malachim. It's very hard, but that is what's asked of us.
What's the problem with the strap that's running around?
It's not talking about the hanging strap, it's talking about like the part around your head.
Yeah, somewhere, something touching your body.
Big deal.
It could be that you're not yotzei for the parts that are touching, like by the not on the arm, but up here that could be, and on your shel rosh for sure. That's a big problem. So that's what the Gemara says, and he fasted for 40 days because of that. I didn't even look and see what Rashi is. Yeah, so Rashi says 6 lines from the bottom. Hashachor bifnim deritzua shchora nir bachut halacha l'moshe misina. Okay, but like David said, that's not applicable everywhere. The poskim write this: if you have a watch, are you allowed to put your ritzuos over your watch? So the dina, a lot of the poskim say that it's mutter. There's no isra chatzitza at that part of the body. Only the strap that's actually holding down on your head, and only the strap that's actually holding down on your arm. But the other ones are not lihikuva.
That saves time.
What?
That saves some time.
I mean, they should all be the black side. Anyways, that's what the Gemara says. So he was ready to bury him. Aile, he takes the body, the mace. He takes Rav Huna, and when he went in to bury him next to Rav Chia, Havagani Yehuda Mimina de Avuha. Rav Chia's son Yehuda was buried on his right. V'Chizkiya mismole, and his son Chizkiya was buried to the left of his father Rav Chia. So where was he going to bury Rav Huna? So Amar le Yehuda leChizkiya. One dead brother says to the other dead brother, Kumi duchtech. You have to assume yourself. You got to move. It's not nice you're making Rav Huna wait. It's a chutzpah. Okay. Bahade de kaim. When the mace moved, when Chizkiya got up, kam bahade amuda denura. When he stood up, there was a pillar of fire that shot out from the ground after his body. This is like out of the movies, like the crypts of the catacombs, where like what's that? Whatever those movies are, like the Indiana Jones movies, when you get down to the bottom. So Chazye Rav Chaga rightfully freaked out. Ibais, he was terrified. That's what Rashi says. If you look 3 lines from the bottom, Niv'as v'nifchad. He jumped back and he was scared. And what he did in order to protect himself was Zakfe la'aron v'nafak asa. He stood up the aron of Rav Huna as a shield and ran out. He had enough. So it says the Gemara, V'hai delo i'anesh onesh mishum dezakve la'arona de Rav Huna. He did what was right, apparently, under the circumstances. Not like we'd be one to judge, but he used Rav Huna to as a shield, and it saved his life. That's what the Gemara says. When Rav Chiza died, similar to the story of Rav Huna, the Gemara says, Sefer Torah Apurie. They too wanted to put a Sefer Torah on his bed. They said, just like he's such a great tzaddik, he fulfilled Kiyim bezeh, right? So what was the language of Rashi? It was a beautiful language. Kiyim zeh mashakasu bazeh. This one fulfilled whatever it says in that one. So let's put the Sefer Torah there. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, no way. Milsa del Rabbi lo svirle. If his Rebbe didn't do it, we learned about Rav Huna.
Repetition of other person?
No, it's a different person. It's his Talmud. Rav Chizda was a Talmud of Rav Huna. So then by Rav Chizda they wanted to do it. Rav Yitzchak said Rav Chizda's Rebbe wouldn't have done it. Rav Huna wouldn't have done it. So therefore, we're not going to do that. So they tore Kriya. Savur delo lemishal kiraihu. They didn't want to correct the Kriya for the Rebbe. So Amar lehu Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ami Chacham Keva shechziru pnei me'achor Amita Shololin. Once a Chacham is buried and you turn away from that burial, then Shololin you can loosely do the stitching of the Kriya. Next, last line. Kinach nafshe the Rabbi bar Rav Hamnuna askin hula hasam. They wanted to move them to Eretz Yisrael. Top of Kav Chesam and Aleph. Kimatu Agishra. When they got to the bridge, getting. What did I say?
Oh. I
said Kav Ches. There is a Kav Ches on the base. It's just wishful thinking. Time trap. Kav Hamid base. Thank you for the correction. Kimatu Agishra. When they got to the bridge, Kamu Gamle. The camels all stopped walking. Amar Hutaya. They had an Arab traveler with them. He says, "Maihi, what's going on? What's going on with these donkeys? With the camels? Why are they not moving?" Amrulay Rabbanan. Amrulay, they said back to this Arab guy who was taking them on the travel. Rabbanan de Ka'avde Yikra Ahadade. They're giving cover to one another. Mar Amar Mar Neil Beresha. One guy says to the other, "You should go first." These are dead bodies, by the way. Umar Amar Mar Neil Beresha. So we're talking about the 2 people listed at the bottom, which is Rabbi bar Rav Huna and Rav Hamnuna. They died at a similar time and were being transported to Eretz Yisrael in a similar transport. So this Arab guy thought that he had the solution. So he said, Amar, Dina hu de Rabbi Bar Huna leil bereisha. Okay, like I'm going to decide for you. You guys are having such a hard time. That guy's going first. Please excuse the derogatory terminology. That's basically what happened. So that's actually what ended up happening. Chalav gamla de Rabbi Bar Huna. Because of what he said, that camel started walking. But this guy got a punishment, and the punishment was nasur kache v'shine de'ahutaya. His molars and his teeth all fell out.
Oh, smack.
Yep. Take a look at Rashi 5 lines down. Rashi says Nasr kache lechayav mishum de bazil Rav Hamnuna, because he spoke negatively of Rav Hamnuna, disparagingly, only by implication. All of his teeth fell out. Says the Gemara. Next, now we're going to discuss different types of poetic eulogies. They used to have safdanim, people who were hired to. They were expert eulogizers. They knew how to capture the room, and they knew how to make people emotional. So they would speak. So let's see what happens. We'll have a couple of samples of drushas that people can use as material for eulogies. Pasach alei hahu yenuka. And there was a young guy who was a safdan, and he said, Gaza yeshishim alami Bavel. A branch of the great trees came from Bavel. V'imo sefer milchamos. And with him came his book of wars. This book of wars is a reference to, Rashi says, Sefer Torah. Lishna charina shenilcham Rabba v'Rav Hamnuna v'nasur kache de'ahutaya. They were talking about this, and that's when all the teeth fell out, and that's all this is recorded there. It's all the recordings of this person. And then kas v'kapod huchpelu, there's a tremendous destruction. There were different words of destruction. They were doubled when these two people died. Liros b'shod v'shever habami shinar. That these are the destructive things that came from Shinar, which is Bavel. They were coming up from Bavel. These two terrible things happened. Katzav alolamo. There was anger brought into the world. V'chamas mimenu nefashos, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu grabbed souls from the earth. The samach bahem, and Hashem was happy with their souls. Kikala chadasha, because these two souls were so beautiful. They came up to Shamayim. Talmidei chachamim. He was so happy, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that people showed up, that these neshamas showed up at such a high level. For about
What does that have to do with anger coming to the world? What was that?
The Hamas. No, it's a good question. I mean, I guess people have to die for a reason. Doesn't mean that they did anything wrong, though. Rashi doesn't comment on that. I don't know. Maybe the real Rashi does. Katzav. Yeah, Rashi says, Katzav HaKadosh Baruch Hu al olamo. There was a reason for Hashem to be angry.
In fact, that he took away the tzaddikim as a sign of
Something else is going on.
Right?
Right. And we also see this throughout Chazal, that the tzaddikim they take the brunt of others, like of the door. So it could be that there was bad stuff going on, but they were, at least as it relates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bringing 2 nefashos to Shamayim that were amazing. Kinach nafshe de Ravina, quarter of the way down, when Ravina died, pasach aleahu saptana, this eulogizer got up and spoke to Marim. The palm trees, haniu rosh al tzaddik katamar. You should be shaking your branches about this tzaddik like a tamar, like a palm tree. Nasim leilos kiyamim. We should be sad just like nights are days. Al mesim leilos kiyamim, like the person who made his nights like days in regards to learning. Amar lei. Ravashi lebar Kipuk. Bar Kipuk was one of these people who was a eulogizer. Hahu Yoma, when I die, he says, my Amris, what will you say about me? Amar le Amina im ba'arazim nafla shalhebes. If by the cedars befell a fire, so there's fire, they caught fire, meaning the reference to death. Ma ya'asu ezovekir. What will we do for the growths that are in the wall? I picture like the green that grows in the wall of the kosel, right? You have these like tiny little brush that are growing there magically out of stone. And what about the rest of us? If the cedar trees get burned down, what about the little people? Livyasan b'chaka hu Allah. If you have a livyasan, this large creature that's pulled up by a hook, ma yasu dage rekak. What about the fish that are in the small amounts of water? We're definitely in trouble. Benachal shotef naflachacha. In a river, we can get pushed down the river, and then you can get pulled by a hook. Ma yasu megabayim. What about the little ones in the small amounts of water? That's not so pleasant. Amar le bar avin, chas v'shalom dechacha v'shalheves b'tzadikei amina. I would never have said those words about hooks and about fires in regards to righteous people. So Rav Ashi says to bar avin, umay amris, what would you say? What would you say at the eulogy for Rav Ashi's funeral? So says the Gemara, amina, I would say, b'chula avelim, cry for the mourners, v'lola aveda, not for the loss of souls, shehila menucha, the souls are fine, v'anu la'anacha, but we're the ones who are sighing, we're the ones who are going through a lot. In both of these cases, Rav Ashi was not so happy. And their feet became very contorted. And when in fact he died, these people did not, where they were not maspid him. This is quite a strong comment. Lo bar kiputz chalitz, lo bar avin chalitz. Because your feet are all contorted, there's no one who could do chalitza on your feet. Your feet are so mangled, no one could do chalitza on you. Says the Gemara 6 lines into the Y lines. Rava.
I'm sorry, why I missed that? Why was this feet contorted?
It doesn't say why their feet were contorted, but it does say that their feet were contorted as an onesh for a mistreatment of Rav Ashi with the subtleties of how they wanted to give a hesped. And the way that Rav Ashi defined them was as the people who were not able to have chalitza done on their feet because they couldn't even get shoes on. Says the Gemara, Rava, asi lediglas, when he came to Diglas. Amar le bar avin kum ema milsa. They got to the river and they had to cross the river. So they said to bar avin, who was a good davener, they said, you need to say something. So Kaiva Amar, he said the following: Bo rov shlishiya b'mayim. We have most of the shlishiya in water. And there's a reference in Sefer Yeshayahu where a shlishi is a reference to Klal Yisrael, and Bo rov shlishi is a reference to Rava, who was equal to the majority of Klal Yisrael. So Rava's come to the water, in short. Zachor v'rachem, remember and have mercy. Ta'inu me'acharecha ki'isha mibayla. We are like a people who have gone astray, as a woman may from her husband. Al taznichenu ka'os me'mara. Do not treat us like those who have to drink the me'mara, the sota waters. Skipping the parentheses, another story. Rav Chanin chasnei de ben Hava. Rav Chanin was the son-in-law at that time of the Nasi. Lo kahava lebni. He didn't have any children. He dived into a Kadosh Baruch Hu and he was blessed with children. Unfortunately, and very unfortunately, Ahu Yoma dehavale, on the day that he had those children, Nach Nafshe, was the day that Rav Chanin died. So Pasach alei Ahu Saptana, Simcha latuga nehefcha. Happiness is turned into sorrow. Sason v'yagon nidbeku. Happiness and tragedy have become one. They've bound into one. Beisim chaso nenach. At the time of happiness, they're sighing. Be'ez chaninaso avad chanino. Very poetic. At the time of the giving of the children, we lost Chanino. Asikule Chanan al Shemei. They named the child Chanan in memory of the father who died on that day.
They happened to my wife's grandfather.
That story?
He passed away after his daughter was born.
Like that day?
Yeah, he died of a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
Taking a nap. Yeah.
That's awful. That is terrible.
So
that's what the Gemara says.
She went to go to the and then it worked out. But,
that's a very powerful story. So we're 2/3 of the way down. I'm sorry to hear that story. You gotta interject. I need something to say in response. You know, like this is a depressing daf to start with. You're making it worse. Okay. Kinach nafshe de Rav Yochanan. When Rav Yochanan passed away, Pasach alei Rav Yitzchak ben Elazar. What did Rav Yitzchak ben Elazar say when the great Rav Yochanan died? Kasha yom l'Yisrael kiyom bo hashemesh b'tzarayim. That this day is hard for the Jewish people, like when the sun set early in the afternoon. Rashi here highlights right here to the left, 2/3 of the way down, maybe a drop more of Ashkia Hashemesh Batzarayim, when the sun set in the afternoon. Did you have a story to share?
No.
Oh, okay. What?
I look like I had
You just coughed or something. I don't know. Okay. Or maybe the sun set earlier. But that this is a reference to Yoshiyahu. Another story about the same person when Rabbi Yochanan died. He did something that was seemingly uncommon and not halachically required. He sat Shiva and he maintained Shloshim. Amar Rabbi Abba Berei de Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Ami de Avad legarmehu de Avad. He was doing this on his own volition. Dahachi Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Afidu Rabba Shlim de Chachma Eno Yoshev Elabel Yom Echad. You only sit one day. You never do Shiva. You never do Shloshim. Kinach nafshe de Rav Zera. When Rav Zera died, Pasach alei Saptana, the eulogizer said, Eretz Shinar hara v'elada, that the land of Shinar of Bavel, they birthed and the child grew up there. But Eretz Tzvi Gila Shashuha. But the Eretz Tzvi, a reference to Eretz Yisrael, that's where he became the great. That's where he became the great Rav Zera. Oy na la amra rekes. How terrible it is for us, said Rekes. We learned in a previous Masechta that Rekes is a reference to Tveria. Ki avda klechem dasa, because we lost the beautiful jewel of our community. Kinach nafshed Rabbi Abo. When he died, says the Gemara, Achisu amude de Kesari Maya. The pillars that were in the city of Kesari, they dripped water. The Rabbi Yossi, when he died, Shafu Marzabe de Tzipori Dama, that the gutters that were in Tzipori, they bled blood. The Rabbi Yaakov is chamiu kochve b'yamama. They were able to see stars during the day when he died. The Ravas,
What bled blood? I'm sorry.
it says that the gutters bled blood, and on the day that Rabbi Yossi died, and then it says that when the day when Rabbi Yaakov died, Rabbi Yaakov is chamiu kochve b'yamama. You were able to see stars during the day. The Rabasi iakru kol ilana. In the days of Rabasi, all the trees were uprooted. The Rav Chia, in the days of Rav Chia, when he died, nechisu kipe denura merakia. Rashi says there were some stones of fire that came out of heaven. The Rav Menachem bar Yossi, when he died, ishtu tzal menaya v'hava l'machletzaya. All of the coins which had their tselem on it, they had their images, they all became flattened and they were no longer valuable. They were just flattened coins. The Rav Tanchum bar Chia is kitzitzu kol andartaya. That when he died, all of the statues were cut down. The Rabbi Yashiv, when Rabbi Yashiv died, there were 70 robberies that took place that night in Machtarta, the sugya from just last week's parsha. My son's bar mitzvah in Baba Machtaras. So in Machtarta, they were digging in, they were tunneling into people's homes. The Rav Hamnuna, when he died, there was hail that came down from the heavens. The Rabbi of Rav Yosef, when Rav and Rav Yosef died, Nashu kipe de prasa hadade. The pillars that were holding up the bridge over the Euphrates, they kissed each other. So the pillars are holding up the bridge, and they collapsed. That's what it means, that they kissed each other. That's what happened.
Wait, what bridge over the Euphrates?
There was a bridge to cross the Euphrates, just a bridge. So that's what the Gemara says. And lastly, the same thing happened, and not lastly, but almost. Dabai v'Rava, when they died, Nashru kipe the Diglas, the Tigris. That's also that bridge collapsed. And Kinach Nafshi, the Rav Mesharshia, tell him Dikle Shitze, when he died, all of the palm trees grew thorns. Okay, we'll stop right here, Tana Rabbanan. And we'll pick up tomorrow, Mr. Hashem, with Daf Chaf Vav. I think I will be here in the end. Most likely my flight's canceled for tomorrow, and I will let you know. But let's assume I'm here until otherwise noted. Wishing you all a beautiful night.